Welcome to the Divorce Podcast, a podcast that aims to address divorce, separation and co-parenting here in the UK, countering the often sensationalist way it's portrayed in the media, challenging the status quo and driving for reform. On each episode, I'm joined by experts to discuss divorce, separation and co-parenting from different angles and to give their opinions and to debate them. I'm Kate Daly, a relationship counsellor and divorce coach, co-founder of Amicable, the divorce services company, and host of the Divorce Podcast. In this episode, I was joined by Professor Lisa Doodson, a chartered psychologist and founder of Happy Steps, a consultancy specialising in step families. As an expert in the field, Lisa frequently contributes to TV documentaries and comments in the press. She's also authored several books, including How to Be a Happy Stepmum. We began by exploring what a step or blended family is, as well as some typical challenges faced. Lisa talked about her own experience of being a stepmum and her tips on introducing biological children to stepchildren through age-appropriate activities such as trips to the park and play. Lisa highlighted the importance of listening to your children when introducing step-siblings and stressed the need to take time. We discussed the notion of drawing boundaries and ways of coping with certain obstacles, such as an uncooperative ex. I was really interested in Lisa's advice about how to establish the rules of engagement with your ex and discussing last-minute changes in plan with your new partner before agreeing to them just to keep the peace. Lisa shared some great tips about choosing your battles, not falling into the good cop, bad cop cycle, setting realistic expectations, and what to expect from children of different ages and genders. If you really loved this episode or want to hear more episodes like this, then please make sure to rate us on your preferred listening platform. Enjoy the episode. Welcome, Lisa.
Thanks, Kate.
It's lovely to have you, and thank you very much indeed for taking the time to be with us today. Just before we start, I thought it might be useful just to outline what I think a blended family is, and then you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong, and if there's any difference between a blended family and a step family. So I kind of think in the context of divorce, which is obviously where the podcast is coming from, a blended family is created when either you or your partner form a new family unit, and then one or both of you has children from a previous relationship. How does that sound? Have I got that right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's just the lines are a little bit blurred, I would say, because I guess the point is, when do you form that family? Is it that you are a step parent when you move in together, when you sort of decide that you're going to move in together, you're going to buy a house, rent a house, whatever? Or is it when you start dating somebody seriously? And I think those are the blurred lines where I find a lot of people think, am I really in that role yet? Or am I just a partner of somebody who has children? So I think you're absolutely right. But I find it's those blurred lines around the edges that people get a little bit confused about. So I suppose my view is always, the moment you start dating somebody seriously who has children, or you have children, then I think you need to consider yourself part of that sort of step blended family type, because actually the issues that you face, the sort of the challenges are the same no matter really at what stage you're at. So they'll be slightly different if you're still living apart. You're not going to be immersed in it, but nevertheless you'll still have those debates. Perhaps if you both have children and you're out on a date and one of the children says, oh well, I'd like an ice cream, and you're thinking, well, we don't eat between meals, or do you know what I mean? It's those sorts of clashes that actually it's how you parent then, and what the other person does and how they react. So personally, I feel it should be earlier that you make that sort of distinction. It can be in your head, but I think it's important because actually the challenges are still there.
Okay. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I was going to take it even one step further back and say, what are the issues when you actually meet somebody and then you've got that whole introducing a new partner? Because I guess that's then going to set the tone, isn't it, for the blended family experience or whatever, potentially. So what are the do's and don'ts around introducing a new partner?
So I think the secret, if there is one, is to do things slowly and carefully. And in your mind, remember that it's you and your partner who have made this decision that you're ready to move on. And that doesn't mean that the children are. So they need to be brought with you on that journey. And Obviously, it depends on their ages and the whole host of different factors. But generally speaking, it's about doing things slowly. And I would say, for a first time meeting, it's nice to do it in a neutral space so they're not feeling overwhelmed in your home or vice versa. So maybe, go on something that's sort of, a nice walk or go to the park and just introduce and depending on the age of the children, you can just sort of introduce that this is your friend or, it's a special friend, and older children, you can be a bit more honest and explain girlfriend, boyfriend type thing. But I think it's just taking the time to do things slowly and remembering you're all at different stages of this journey. Not everyone's sort of with you, you've got to sort of gather them all together.
Yeah, because I guess it's quite hard, isn't it, if you're all enthusiastic about the new love of your life and your children or your ex-partner are much more reticent about the meeting. I mean, ultimately, no ex-partner has the right to stop you introducing children, do they?
No, they don't. But, they generally, you'd hope, have the children's best interests. And I think nobody wants to make too many mistakes. It's sort of, the sort of, here's a new partner this week and next week there's another new partner. Clearly, nobody wants to do that. So it's a balance, isn't it, between finding someone that you think it's serious and therefore it's important to introduce the children to, or perhaps you wait a little bit. So it is that sort of tricky balance, and the chances are that not everyone will agree. So it's about being confident and sometimes not necessarily listening to everybody. If the ex-partner is saying, I don't want you introducing, you're absolutely right. They don't have that right to demand those restrictions on your life. But it's about pushing back to them maybe and saying, you have to trust me, I'll do things appropriately and with care with the children.
And then what are the timings? So at what point? So you've met the children. I guess it's a slow and gradual build up into how you think about being a blended family then, isn't it? Because you've got the introduction of almost possibly two sets of children, haven't you? So is there a good time to get all the children together, or is it better to introduce them one set of children at a time to each other, or what's the best way of handling all of that? So let's just say, for the sake of argument, you've both got kids. Is it one big let's get everybody together and just see what happens, or are you doing it in stages?
Gosh, it's so difficult, Kate, because there are so many different sort of situations. Often your plans can get thrown apart because the children aren't necessarily with you all at the same time. So, you might find that one of you has their children one weekend and the other is out of sync and, they're not around at the same time. So for couples like that, you might find it's easier to take it, let's meet your children, I'll meet your children. And actually, if you're on your own, it's a good way of meeting the children because you're not sort of, you're distracted by your children. But that's not to say, it's fine to actually all meet together. That's fine as well. I think it's really, I would say, not getting too panicked about it and making it such a big deal. I think it's about being yourself. Blended families do far better when everyone's relaxed and everyone's just being themselves. If you're trying to be somebody you're not, trying to be the best step parent ever, the chances are you'll fail because you're giving yourself too many expectations. It's about try and relax, just be yourself, and it will happen slowly and over time. You'll get to know each other and the relationships will sort of slowly build, and then you can take things to the next stage in terms of your relationship with your partner as everyone gets to know each other.
You can see and understand really why people are perhaps not as relaxed, because there's so much weight placed on not damaging children and trying to do things in the best, most child-centric way. When you divorce, there's a lot of pressure comes when you're trying to, introduce children to children and children to the other adult and so on and so forth. So I can really understand why it becomes really fraught and just trying to do everything so nobody gets hurt or no one's upset. There's a lot at stake, isn't there? So I can totally get why it feels so stressful. But I hear what you say as well. You're going to get a better outcome if everyone can take it with a bit of a pinch of salt and just stay as calm and relaxed. And it sounds like a little and often in the build up is perhaps a good way to start.
Yeah, I think so, Kate. I mean, you're absolutely right. If you think of every blended family, there are losses in that family because everyone will have gone through, a previous sort of lost relationship and moved on, and including the children, and they've got to get used to that. So that's why it's important to take things slowly. And I think often that's the one thing that couples that they really struggle with, because they found each other and, they're moving on, and they expect and want everyone to move with them, including the children and friends and family. And it's that sort of that journey that can be sort of very difficult, because not everybody is at the same place. And I think there is so much pressure because there has been a loss, and you want things to go so well, and you ultimately be happy again. So the best thing I would say to do is, take your time, remember to just think about what's happening with the children, not push them too much. Think about why they're behaving the way they are. So if they are misbehaving or whatever, or not talking to you as a step parent, for example, or engaging with you, it can be that they feel guilty. They're worried about the parent that isn't there. So it's trying to look at it from their shoes as well as your own. So it is difficult, but I guess, the hope is that people will get there. We have, so many families now that that are step families and are successful, they're happy, but it is fraught with danger, and it's difficult. It's a difficult path, but that doesn't mean to say it's not doable. It absolutely is.
Well, you're a stepmom yourself, aren't you? So what was your experience of this early stage like? How did you navigate it?
Oh, it's a long time ago, Kay. I'm not sure I can remember. Yes, it's over 20 years ago, and the children were very young. And I guess, I guess we all make mistakes, and perhaps, I didn't listen to my own advice now, saying take it slowly. And we tried to listen to the children, but often, you move on. I was in my own house, and my children, my partner had a son, and so it was really just sort of getting them to meet each other. They were very little, and so it was just letting them play, doing things together. So when we were all together, we weren't together all the time because the children were sort of shuffling backwards and forwards to visit other parents. But when we were together, the plan was to do things nice together, so age appropriate, going to the park, going on bikes, whatever. And I suppose it's just listening to the children and checking they're okay. And they feed back to you in their own ways. And it's just making sure that you keep those pathways open so they are happy. And, over time, the things take a long time, but you look back and realize how far you've come, and I can say that after 20 odd years. And, of course we didn't get everything right, but you learn and you adjust and hopefully bring them along on that journey.
You have Happy Steps now, which is a consultancy that helps people, with their blended families and to make those adjustments. What are the most common things that you get asked about?
So I would say a lot of couples come to me if it's normal about this sort of the 2-year mark. It's so frequent, so we've been together about 2 years, and it's like the magic sort of figure. And I think really that's because you're in a honeymoon period, and it's sort of like everything's rosy, and I love my partner and I love their children and they'll love me and it'll all be fine. And I think everyone works their way into sort of trying to make things happen, and then over time realize that perhaps there are a few issues, and I guess some of those issues are the key ones that are around sort of what's your role in the family. Are you the children's friend? Are you an extra parent? And understanding and agreeing with your partner. So that's always a very, very difficult one. And understanding your role with the children. What about discipline? If you disagree with your partner, have you the right to say, well, I don't want them eating dinner in the bedrooms? Or do you know what I mean? It's those sorts of questions that actually any family will have them, but in a step family or by a blended family where you've got a difference in sort of power, I suppose, because you've got the biological parent and then the step parent, and they start off with different power over the children because they're not equal, and that can be very difficult. And then I guess the final one, which if the sort of the top three, I suppose, is the ex-parent, the parent who isn't within that relationship interfering, and making demands, oh, you can't take the children to school. I don't want so and so involved. I don't want this, that, and the other. And that can be very, very draining, really difficult for someone to deal with when, it's this outside force in a family. We want to be in charge of our own destiny. We want, it's our little sort of safe haven. And when someone is sort of telling you what you can and can't do, when you can go on holiday, perhaps when you can't, it's very difficult. And that can cause a lot of anxiety in step parents.
Is it reasonable for the parent that isn't there to say, I don't want your partner or your new girlfriend or your new boyfriend taking the children to school? Is that reasonable, or are you trying to encourage parents to move on from that space?
I suppose it's very difficult to give a blanket answer whether it's reasonable or not, because I think it depends on each situation. But I think you have to ask why, if you are the parent demanding that and saying, I don't want whatever, I think you have to ask yourself why you're doing it. Are you doing it for the children, or are you really doing it for yourself? And I think, it's not for me to say these are absolute rules, because I think it just so depends on the children and the situation. But often when people do make those demands, really it's about themselves, not the interests of the children. But, like I say, there's a variety of situations.
How do you work with that then if you're being asked to help by the partner, the couple, effectively the new couple, and you've got a parent who's not involved in that couple being difficult? How do you work in that space when you may not have any direct contact with the parent who's putting down, or marking boundaries?
That's a really good question, Kate. I guess as an example, I suppose I can give, I was working with a couple and they were the blended family, and I think he had a young daughter, and the biological mom, who I wasn't working with, was saying, she doesn't want to go on holiday with you. It will upset her. She's not ready. She's, and there were lots of issues, and they were very frustrated because they felt that she would be fine, and the dad was very, really keen to take his daughter. And in the end, I worked with the biological parents. So we did a mediation session with the biological parents, the mom, and looked at how we could sort of move forwards. And really it was sort of taking things very slowly and saying, well, how about they go away for a long weekend, and every day your daughter can give you a call just to say at 6 o'clock, hi mum, I'm fine, I've had a lovely day. And that way you can be reassured she's okay. And then come back and see if maybe the next trip you could make a little bit longer. And that worked really well. And over time they, that's absolutely, that was several years ago now, and things are, are completely fine. That's not always possible. That's one outcome. But the other way is really to help the couple deal with what's in their sphere of control. So if the other person won't engage with mediation, or that's not appropriate, my job is to help the couple deal with what they can control. So it's no use trying to change somebody else if that's their view. They're entitled to their view. But how do you navigate, yourself and your family around that sort of immovable, whatever that happens to be? If it's, you're not allowed to do X, Y, Z, is it reasonable? Do you do it anyway? Do you ignore that? Do you talk to someone else? Do you find a friend to talk to? It's around sort of looking at ways of, I guess my job is to help the couple cope more effectively with the challenges, and we look at different ways of doing that.
So not necessarily swooping in and solving the problem, but helping people cope with what's in front of them, as you said, and just deal with their reality rather than necessarily changing that reality.
Yes, because, often trying to change things, as you quite rightly pointed out at the beginning, if you've got somebody who doesn't want to engage with the process, and quite often that person doesn't see a need to, they will say, for example, well, it's not my relationship. You're the one in that relationship. I don't need to get involved and help you. I'm doing very well, thank you very much, on my own with the children. So it's how do you, there is no way of letting that, that person, if they don't want to engage, that's fine. That's up to them. It's really just helping the couple navigate some of these challenges, and they may be with the ex-partner, but equally they can be, they can sort of be, it could be other relations, extended family members, that sort of thing can be quite challenging.
Do you work with extended family very often? Are people sort of more aware of the need and the importance of the extended family, do you think?
I don't think they are as aware as I think they should be. I don't work with the extended family. I think my view is very much to work with the couple as the priority and give them the tools to help them deal with, any other challenges they might have. But what we do know from my own research is that step families have less social support than biological families. And we also know that social support is linked with well-being. So if you've got less support, you're more susceptible, you have less resilience. So actually, it's really important to have, it's like the triad of support. You've got your partner, and then you've got family members, and you've got friends, and you need all of those, and if you rely too much on one, then, it's really going to destabilize you. It's going to make you feel very vulnerable. So, again, it's, I guess my job is to make sure to make them aware of that and to encourage them to, where they can, bring the sort of the grandparents with them if they can, and friends, and help them to sort of bolster that support network.
And if you're dealing with a difficult ex, how can you support your partner? Because I guess it's very easy for you to band together and, the evil ex lives outside of your sort of relationship and you can almost whip each other up and egg each other on. But is there a better way of supporting your partner if their ex is proving tricky and not helpful?
Yeah, so I mean, it's it's a very, very challenging, can be very challenging. And I think some of the things that I suggest to couples is that, never, I think when you've got a difficult ex, the challenge is always, or the easy way is to say, oh yes, I'll agree to that. They'll sort of, send a message in, and it's, you just want them away. You want to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Can you do this, today instead of tomorrow? Can you? Yes. Like, let's move on. And then you go back to your partner and say, oh, I've arranged to swap the children. We're going to do this, that, and the other. And they say, oh, what about me? And I guess one of the things you can do that starts to create this sort of protective barrier, I suppose, between, with your family and then your ex-partner, is to have some rules of engagement, if you like. So with your partner, to say, look, I won't make any changes to the children's sort of, toing and froing, what days we're at, whatever we're doing, holidays, without speaking to you first. So if you get a call from your ex and you answer it and they say, oh, I've just booked a holiday, can you look after them? So you immediately say, I'd need to check with my commitments at work. You don't have to say, I've got to check with my partner, but you can say, I've got to check my diary. I'll get back to you. Don't be frightened of sort of not putting them first. It's about saying
time. Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. It's not rushing into that sort of, I've got to get rid of them. And I see that an awful lot. And it causes this, even silencing them, for example, on your phone, so that, you're having dinner and suddenly, with your partner, and your ex name pops up, oh, they need to talk. Oh, I'll go and it just interrupts all that, the quality time with your partner. It feels like that's eaten up by, the ex all the time. And I think it's making those rules, and they can be really, quite minimal, but actually sticking with them so that your partner knows, they come first. And actually, yes, of course, if there's an emergency and your ex-partners ring and say, can you pick up the kids? Or, there's been an emergency. Absolutely. But know when it's an emergency, and know when it's just their demands that actually you can sort of push back to later in the day or at the weekend or whatever that might be.
It sounds like it's about having boundaries, isn't it? And we often talk about this in the work that we do. There's a transition from being a parent to being a co-parent. And it's not something that's talked about very much, and there's not much around in terms of how you do that. But the boundaries, the rules, the language, the way you deal with each other, it has to shift quite dramatically to this new world and this new world view. And if you've then got somebody else in the mix as well, a new partner, then even more boundaries become required, don't they, in terms of being able to know, as you say, what's urgent, what's not urgent, what you need to respond to immediately versus what you can buy some time with and come back with. So I'm really fascinated about that journey from parent to co-parent.
Yeah, it is very difficult. And, often we talk about co-parenting, and when we get it right, it's co-parenting. But if it's not going well, often there's that sort of second path, which is parallel parenting, where you're not so engaged with your ex-partner because things are very high conflict. And so I guess it's important to recognize, it's not just about pleasing them, so it's all easy going. If it's conflictual, then take a step back. Of course, you have a plan with the children, but actually keep things quite separate so that it's the conflict that hurts children, not the fact you've separated or divorced. They can cope with that, but they can't cope so well with the conflict.
And we've talked a little bit about boundaries and different values. Just thinking about the new kind of relationship that you're forming and the new kind of family unit that you're creating. How do you do that? How do you agree? Like you made sort of a comment earlier about, what happens if one child wants an ice cream. How do you navigate all of that if you're coming with two different value sets? And I guess also, how do you know if you've got different value sets? Because I guess it takes a bit of time for that to unfold or to come to the surface. So I'm just, it would be very trite for me to say, obviously the best thing to do here is just to sit down and have a big open discussion. But when do you do that? How do you know your value sets are different? What sort of happens in that dynamic for you to realise that a conversation is required? Or are there questions you should be asking a new partner who has children before you even sort of engage in a relationship? Are there things you should sit down and work out before it goes beyond a couple of dates? Or is that too prescriptive?
I guess in a way we do this with all, when we're getting to know somebody with a prospective partner, I suppose we start to find the areas where we feel we have things in common. And it's the same thing with children, I suppose, because we talk about our children a lot. And as we get to know them, and I guess, we're taking things slowly. So you start to see things, and often it's the small things that really irritate us rather than the big things. We can put, guidelines in place for the big things. What do you want out of life? How do you deal with X, Y, and Z? But it's all the little annoyances, where, I don't know, even things like, do you all eat together? Or, have you got used to your children just sort of sloping off to sit in front of the TV? Or how much does it bother you? And some people would say, oh, that's just, couldn't bear it. Others would say, oh, I don't really mind. It's fine. And so the chances of finding somebody who's exactly the same on everything are remote. You're bound to have these challenges.
Zero.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's about finding sort of a cooperative way forward. So, if it's really important to you, I mean, I always say, pick your battles, let some things slide that don't really matter. But if for you, the most important thing, is, I don't know, they get their homework done and then they get to bed at a regular time and you have an hour with your partner. If that's really important for you, make sure that your partner knows and that you agree that that's what you'll do in your family. There's no rights and wrongs to any family. We all do things slightly differently. The important thing in a step family, though, is that you absolutely agree between you that that's what you want to do. Because the moment the children see that one of you wants to do one thing and another one isn't quite so bothered or whatever, suddenly you'll end up with sort of good cop, bad cop, or, oh, mum will let me do this or dad will let me do. And, you're actually single parents parenting your own children who happen to be going out together. You're not a family anymore.
In a shared space sometimes. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting distinction.
Yeah. So I think it depends what you want. And as I said, it's not for me to say, that's right or wrong. Absolutely. Everybody, takes happiness from in different ways. But if you want to create a blended family, a family that, you have shared experiences, shared goals, all of those, important things for us, then it's about having that clarity over how you want to parent, look after the children when they're with you.
And if all of the children are together as well, presumably, there's got to be one set of rules for all the children. So it's not even like you can have two, like some single parents, they have, or parallel parenting situations, there are different rules in different houses. But if all the children are together at any point, presumably there has to be one set of rules, otherwise that would be mind-blowingly complicated.
Yeah, I agree. There has to be. And I mean, again, you might argue that if you've got a very big difference in age range, there might be differences. But fundamentally, you have to parent them the same, because if you then go on to have a shared child, that child is going to be brought up with the same rules as well. So, I think it's really important that, you have the same sort of guidelines for the children, and children are really good at coping with differences. They go to school, they have different rules there, different rules at grandma and granddad's. It's fine. They cope really well. It's just, it takes them a little bit of time, because if they're only coming to you for part of the week or whenever, it can take a little time to adjust to the role. So it's sort of, make sure you give them that time really to adjust. It should be fine.
And, we haven't really had time to explore in any depth any of these sort of age or gender differences. Are there any big ones that sort of jump out at you where age differences or gender have a really big impact on how you go about this?
So, I mean, from research, we know that the most difficult really for the transition are teenagers, which is probably no surprise. Younger children adapt to change.
Well, they're just difficult generally, aren't they? Let's face
it. There is that, Kate, yes. Younger children cope really well.
I might be biased. I have two at the moment.
Yeah, so there you go. It's a good, good excuse. They just, it's harder for them because they're at a point where they're trying to assert, their own independence. And then if you've got somebody saying, well, you need to go and visit your dad then and come and stay here, then it's very, very difficult. Whereas younger children can adapt much easier to that shared nature, I suppose. In terms of gender, there really aren't many differences other than just what you might expect in terms of who gets on. If you're a stepmum and you've got a teenage boy, that's really difficult because, what things can you bond, with? What sort of things are they likely to do? It might be, I don't know, I'm sure you can find things, but it's quite difficult. Whereas if you've got, I don't know, a 6-year-old little girl and she likes makeup or she likes dressing up, or, you could take her out and go and have ice cream with her. There's lots of, you can bond on different things. So it's just difficult for certain sort of combinations, I suppose, but it doesn't mean it's impossible at all. It's just keep realistic expectations. You're not going to bond with them very quickly and build this fantastic relationship quickly. It will take time, and it's about finding out about them. So, just be kind to yourself really, and just let things happen slowly.
And if, the worst happens and your new relationship breaks down, but you've built a relationship with your ex's children, do you have any sort of rights or anything to be able to continue to see them? Should you continue to see them?
I suppose legally, no, you don't. There are no, you don't have any rights at all, and that can be very difficult. I suppose it very much depends. I'm afraid there's no absolute. If the children are older and, you have known them for several years, then, absolutely. But I would imagine that they would make those links with you as well. And no one really is going to prevent that. I think younger children, if you haven't known them very long and, perhaps the split hasn't been amicable, it's going to be difficult because then you're expecting the children to sort of, see mum and dad and then you as the step parent as well. And if everyone's sort of taking a slice out of this time, it starts to become difficult. So I suppose, it really depends on how long that relationship's been going on and how old the children are. But ultimately, you have no rights. It's about just perhaps appealing to your ex-partner and keeping things as amicable as possible.
But does it do damage, do you think? Is there any evidence to say that the withdrawal of that relationship does damage? I guess it's going to depend on the quality of the relationship ultimately, but...
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, if you're the step parent and you're the one who leaves and you've left the your partner, but the children might think you've left them, I guess it's important to try and explain to them, again, it's age appropriate, but trying to get them to understand you haven't left them and you're still there for them. if they want to see you. But it might not be as easy as that if your partner doesn't want you to see them. So I suppose it's trying to have that communication with the children in the best way you can, to explain to them they've done nothing wrong. You still would like to be part of their life, if you can, and you're always there for them. That would be a nice way of trying to deal with it, because it's just about abandonment, really. If they feel that you've walked in their life and then walked out, maybe the next person's going to do the same, or how can they trust people? So it's really doing what you can to minimize that sort of that grief.
Well, Lisa, I could talk all afternoon. I'm really sorry we're about at the end of time, but thank you so much for everything that you said. Do you have any final tips or advice if people find themselves in a blended family?
So I would say, as we've said a few times, it's about time. So take your time, don't rush. And I would say have realistic expectations and have fun. If you have fun and you start building your own traditions and your own memories, that will sustain you when things go a little bit awry, and you can build on that. So, try not to, if you find yourself getting anxious, try and understand the roots of it, do some reading, have a look around the subject, but have fun. When we're having fun, when we're enjoying ourselves, we build the best relationships, and that should stand you in good stead as you move forwards.
Oh, fantastic advice to end on. Thank you. Where can people find out a bit more about you, Lisa?
They can go on Happy Steps, the website, and there's lots of information on there. So that's, they're very welcome to go and have a route around there. If they want to get in touch.
What's the address for Happy Steps?
happysteps.co.uk.
Brilliant. Thank you. And you're going to say you're on?
And I'm on Instagram, happysteps_Dr. Lisa, and I do some short videos on there. So often there's different pieces of advice they can sort of pick up, and they can request things on there as well. And if they just want to contact me, Lisa at happysteps.co.uk, I'm always very happy to hear from people, and I'm very happy to help if I can.
That's lovely. Thank you. And you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Kate_Daly. You can hear more about new podcast episodes by following at divorce_podcast. And if you enjoyed this podcast and would like to subscribe to more, you can do that by following thedivorcepodcast.com. Lisa, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you everybody for listening.